recently, in the papal encyclical on charity, the Pope talks about development. And my question to the encyclical is, how can you talk about development on a continent like Africa and not mention women? How is that possible? Analogously, how can we talk about the church as family without recognizing the pivotal role of women as leaders and ministers? The church, as one theologian has argued, called family, is first and foremost her family. So in many fields of ministry, women in Africa have an impressive record as pioneers, leaders, and ministers. A gift that I believe ought to be integrated, received, celebrated within the Christian community. There are declarations, official declarations, that state that, and I quote, in Africa, the woman is at the heart of the family, end of quote. Or, another quote, she is the backbone and stability of the family, end of quote. Now, these have remained largely empty declarations. In reality, she suffers the most as a victim of various forms of injustice, abuse, oppression, marginalization in society and in the church. The 1994 African Synod made a bold and radical declaration. It stated, and I quote, "The quality of our church as family also depends on the quality of our women folk, be they married or members of the institutes of the consecrated life," end of quote. The way I read this statement is that the quality of the church would be seriously compromised if women were denied full and active participation in the life of the church called family. To accord women full and active role would include, for example, and again I quote the Synod, involving women in decision making at all levels of her church. Responsibility for leadership in all spheres of church and society, and full and active participation in ministry. And I would add, it would also remove the condescending tendency within our Christian community to thank women in the church for their devoted service, for their generous service to the church. Whoever thanks the men, think about it. So what is the point? The church in Africa is describing itself as family. Central to the role and understanding of family, central to the understanding of family, is the role of the African woman. This self-understanding of church, even if it is only presently proclaimed in words rather than in deeds, I believe poses a challenge to the rest of the Christian community globally. The question I ask is, on the basis of this understanding, how inclusive are we in the assignment of ministerial and leadership roles? How much of the values of justice, equity, and fairness that we hold up to secular society do we practice in the community called family? For how long will the church remain a bastion of male-dominated leadership and patriarchal privileges? The church of the global south is asking this question. They are not just questions for the church in the global north, but for the church universally speaking. I'd like to move on To use a Jesuit terminology, nowadays, ecology is the new theological and ethical frontier. During my first presentation, I talked about the curse of natural resources, or the paradox of plenty on the continent. That is the fact that many African countries remain economically backward despite being rich in natural resources and extractive minerals. And I believe that the fact that the continent is at the receiving end of the exploitation of its natural and mineral wealth places this continent in a unique position to offer some useful insight on the environment as a theological and ethical concern. In this encyclical which I just referred to, Caritas in Veritate, Benedict XVI would argue that certain models and practices of development pose a threat to the state of the Earth's ecological health. Now, the continent of Africa is one of those places where forests continue to be decimated, rivers polluted, and toxic wastes dumped indiscriminately in urban centers in the name of development and trade. The ecological war being waged against Africans by multinational extractive companies is a direct assault on the African notion of life. And it has been interesting over the last few weeks to watch the intense engagement, the intense interest in the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. So intense that it even threatens the political establishment. And it makes me wonder, we have been going through this in my country for the last 40 years. Rivers polluted, means of livelihood completely destroyed. And by who? Shell, BP, Chevron, Exxon. When we talk of life in Africa, we think something beyond biological life. It is life that extends to the realm of nature. So from an African perspective, respect for life also contains a moral duty to protect and care for the natural environment and creation as a whole. There is something more interesting about how nature is construed, particularly in indigenous African religions. These indigenous religions consider the realm of the natural environment as charged with and inhabited by a multiplicity of spirits. For this reason, some anthropologists have been quick to categorize indigenous African beliefs that underpin respect for environmental ecology as neo-paganism, animist, or pantheism. I think this labeling is prejudicial. What is at play here is the belief that the human person and the cosmos share a common fate. There is a vital connection between the human person and the cosmos that allows each one to influence the other. The connection is not simply tenuous. It is vital. That it means that one can only save oneself by saving the cosmos. Now, this approach to environmental ecology in indigenous African religions is not simply theoretical. I believe that it's a unique kind of spirituality